Aboriginal and treaty rights are complex. Understanding the terms connected to them can provide valuable perspective for all islanders. Aboriginal rights are based on how Indigenous nations traditionally lived and used lands before colonization. They are entrenched in Canada's Constitution. A treaty is a solemn agreement between nations. It sets out ongoing promises, mutual obligations, and benefits. Indigenous treaties in Canada are signed by both the Crown and Indigenous peoples. The peace and friendship treaties are the foundation of the relationship between the Mi'kmaq and the Crown, as well as all citizens. The Aboriginal rights of the Mi'kmaq include self-governance, the power to govern their internal affairs and make the decisions that affect their community. In 1982, when the federal government patriated Canada's Constitution, in Section 35, it formally entrenched Aboriginal and treaty rights in Canadian law. In 1999, the Supreme Court of Canada, in the Marshall decision, affirmed that the peace and friendship treaties between the Mi'kmaq and the British Crown are still valid, and that they provide the Mi'kmaq with the treaty right to hunt, fish, and gather in pursuit of a moderate livelihood. Earlier, the Supreme Court of Canada's Sparrow decision recognized and affirmed that Aboriginal rights predate Canada's beginnings as a country. The court held that Aboriginal rights that existed in 1982, such as fishing for food, social and ceremonial purposes, are protected under the Constitution of Canada, and they cannot be infringed on by government without justification. Despite all this, the Indian Act of 1876 persists. Through it, the federal government still administers Indian status, local First Nations governments, and the management of reserve land and communal funds. The Act's original goal was to eradicate First Nations culture. It enabled trauma, human rights violations, and social and cultural disruption for generations. Although amended, it remains a troubling reminder of injustice and colonialism in Canada. The Mi'kmaq Prince Edward Island Canada Framework Agreement is a forward-looking initiative to protect the Mi'kmaq way of life now and for future generations. Signed in early 2019 by the Mi'kmaq of Prince Edward Island, the Government of Prince Edward Island, and the Government of Canada, it lays the groundwork for moving beyond the Indian Act into a new era of friendly relations and mutual respect. Onluwe is an initiative by the Mi'kmaq of Prince Edward Island. The organization is mandated by the PEI Mi'kmaq leadership, the Ebiguit Assembly of Councils, and focuses on protecting, preserving, and implementing Ebiguit Mi'kmaq rights. It supports the Assembly in the negotiations with the federal and provincial governments concerning Aboriginal and treaty rights claims. For more on Aboriginal and treaty rights terminology, visit onluwe.ca/terms.